Yeah.
All right, everyone. It's been over 2 hours. I wanna need out. It's a Sabbath, so I get to need out on the Sabbath. I
Excellent.
hope everyone enjoyed their night. Um, we had.
Actually,
Go ahead.
actually, would I be able to have a debate here? Because I've just been waiting, kind of, just for your conversation to finish, because I don't want to interrupt you guys.
All right, go ahead. We got thinking
Yes,
officers. Yeah.
it's Waleed from Eyes Wide Open,
Okay.
and I just want to challenge your statement. I don't know if you've recanted on it recently, but that the Quran and Muhammad are operating off of Greek philosophy, which is a baseless claim.
Look, Waleed, I know that the Muslim religion as a whole operates off of Greek philosophy, and I don't think you would deny that. It's just
I'm speaking about the Quran in particular. I'm sola scriptura. I'm not holding myself to the tomes of theology that Muslims have, or so-called Muslims have developed afterwards. I'm holding specifically to the Quran.
so there's nothing in the Quran that you don't need the hadiths for.
Nothing at all. And actually, right now, I am writing a book which is a complete refutation of the Hadith position. And actually, if you follow the Hadith, it is antithetical to the Quranic message because God very clearly says the Quran is complete. It is clear. It is the only source that we need for guidance in the Muslim life. And to follow the Hadith is contradictory to the own Quran spirit and letter.
Okay, well the problem is that vision and prophecy ceased in the first century, and that's what Paul and Christ and the apostles told us was going to happen, was that they were the last inspired messengers of God. And this whole idea that 5, 6 centuries later, this other prophet would arise, I don't see it from the Bible. And
No,
so,
I'm
you
not
know,
I'm not debating. I'm mainly I'm trying to discuss the claim here that the Quran is a book that teaches Neoplatonism because you made that video, then I made my video responding, and I challenged you to a debate, and that never happened. So I thought I would just take the opportunity
yeah,
tonight
I'm
to
not. I'm
discuss
not.
that with
I
you.
have told everyone for like 10 years, I'm not a Quran scholar. I'm not. I
Can
just I
you go
have
back on that statement then?
read the creeds of the Muslims, of the primary Muslims, and they're Neoplatonic. And I think you would actually agree with that. And this thing that you're making me do, to spend all these years to study the difference between the Quran and the Hadith, I have absolutely zero interest in doing it, and I will not do it, and I have no reason to do it.
Well,
And
you did make a video quoting the Quran and trying to say that it teaches Neoplatonism, and
it
you kind of in the video you mixed between the Quran and also things that so-called Muslim
Yeah,
theologians said, right? I'm really just trying to clear the Quran of this reputation, and the verses are very clear in the Quran that God is it teaches
bro.
that God is a literal physical being who sits on the throne above the flat earth, and I have all the quotations here. It's all in my book.
Okay, hold on. I what I did cite was that the Quran teaches eternal conscious torment, which I think you admitted to.
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
teaches it within a physical
Mhm.
understanding that the skins will continually regenerate.
But dude, you're coping on that, man. You're
How is
coping
that
on
no
cope?
that.
worries.
It's,
Y-
how is that cope? That's very clear. The Quran says that so often as their skins are burned through, they will be replaced with new skins. That
y-
is how their eternal conscious
on
will be
what
carried out. It's not a ghost.
basis? Like, dude, there's no basis for any eternal conscious torment anywhere in what I consider the scriptures, the Tanakh and the New Testament. There's nothing that justifies this idea. This idea was
His basis would
developed.
be
It,
resurrection.
it, it was
Does the
developed
Quran
later
teach
on.
resurrection?
That I would present to you that as an indication that the men who wrote the Quran were under the influence of Catholic theology.
Yeah, because they don't teach
Well,
resurrection. The only
what does
way
Well,
his
Catholic
paradigm
theology
makes
speak
sense is
about?
if they teach resurrection. Can you
What
address
does
that, sir? Can you address
Sorry,
that, sir?
could
What
you
does
repeat
the
that again?
Quran say about resurrection?
That according to the Quran, when a human being dies, we go to sleep in the ground. We will be resurrected physically on the day of judgment. God will assemble our bones, and He will call us to account for the way we lived our life. That's what the
Well, I
Quran
know
teaches.
that's
Let
in the
let let
Bible.
let's
Like, do you have
let's
a
let's let
citation for that?
let's let Hans in on the conversation because I hear Hans in the background wanting
Sure.
to talk.
Yeah, I was the one that gave Drake the passages on psychopanacea in the Quran.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I'll show you right here. The Quran, again, it teaches everything. This whole like Greek metaphysical abstract worldview, it is entirely missing from the Quranic
Oh,
corpus. It's
what I
all
said was that
couched in the
so
physicalist, empiricist worldview. And you know, the way the Quran uses the word, all the soul means, or nafs in Arabic, in Hebrew it's nefesh. All nafs and soul mean, it just talks about the self, the free will,
I'm showing
deliberative
passages
being.
that equate
It's
the
not
nafs
talking
with
about
the heart.
those. Yeah, go ahead.
Nafs is specifically equated with the qalb. It's equated with the heart.
Show me the quotation.
I'll bring it up right now. Hold on.
Right. I mean, even it's used in the exact same context that the Bible uses it, because even the Bible, it says, what does it say? That you will love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy
Hold,
soul and
hold
all
on,
thy
hold on,
mind.
hold on. I just want to introduce this, guys. We have two like Middle Eastern to Southern Middle Eastern guys who both know Arabic, who are both multilingual, and know the Quran, know the Muslim texts, and are about to debate. Get
Let's
my
go.
popcorn out. Let's go. Let's do it.
He doesn't actually.
Well,
He doesn't
firstly,
actually know Arabic.
Awesome.
I want to deal with, because I want to go point by point. Firstly, so the first point I brought up is, well, I guess you said that, and that is true, the Quran does teach eternal conscious torment. But in the video you made it seem like the only, and actually you said this, I quote it in the video, that the only way to have a doctrine of eternal conscious torment is via this like eternal ghost, Greek metaphysical doctrine. I've shown you clearly in the Quran how it's carried out in a physical manner where God will regenerate the skin. So will you?
I get it, dude. The point is that hold on. The concept of eternal conscious torment is utterly foreign to the Tanakh and the New Testament, and the only people that I've ever seen in world history that have taught this are Neoplatonists. And it's obvious that this ideology was a derivation, but I'll give Hans the floor.
I see what you're saying.
Well,
I see what you're saying.
I showed you
The nafs eradicated.
that eternal conscious torment happens, and it's couched in a physical understanding. Are you going to accept the correction on that one?
You haven't articulated
Is he talking to me?
the Muslim doctrine of
I'm talking to Drake.
resurrection.
Yes.
No, I'm not, because I know the historical context of the Quran. The Quran was a development of Ebionite and Nestorian theology. The Neoplatonism of the Nestorians obviously influenced their theologians who wrote the Quran to teach this doctrine of eternal torment. The eternal torment is nowhere in Scripture.
Point me the Neoplatonic metaphysic within the Quran. It's entirely missing. God is not an abstraction in the Quran. He's a physical, literal being.
I would ask you to show me where you get eternal conscious torment in the Tanakh or in the New Testament.
That's a separate question, which God willing I will deal with.
Okay, then I'm done. I got nothing else to say. Hans, you can take the rest.
Okay, I'll answer. Since you're not going to answer my point, I'll answer your point on the New Testament or the Old Testament, New Testament. There's no conscious or eternal conscious torment. Yeah, I will say I start with the Quran as my worldview, and the Quran, according to its own statements, it acts as a correction and control over what has been added into the previous scriptures. So the fact that, there's tons of things in the Old Testament that contradict the Quran. There's plenty of things that contradict in the New Testament that contradict the Quran. It says Jesus is the Son of God. It says all these things. And the Quran acts as a control over these things. The Quran is the standard and the criterion. That's what I operate on.
What's
the explicit Quranic text on resurrection?
Sure, let's pull some up.
Hans, you got this from now on. I'm done. I'm just gonna eat popcorn and listen.
Well, does it say the
Can I
nafs is
interject a
eradicated?
question to everybody?
Derek,
In the New
back
Testament-
back off. This is Hans and Waleed here now.
I just want to ask
Does
that
it
if
say the nafs is eradicated?
Derek, back off.
Everybody's gonna be
Derek, back
directly
off. Back off.
I just want to get a response on resurrection, and I'll back off.
Yeah,
as
I'm
well.
just trying to pull up some verses right now on the matter.
Yeah, I would. Again, we both admit that the Quran teaches that God is a physical being and whatnot. You don't deny that. And that it teaches resurrection. You don't deny that. But what Drake specifically pointed out was the noetic soul.
So you're not going to present any Quranic text on resurrection. Is that what
I'm pulling
getting?
it up right now. I'm typing it up on my
Okay,
computer.
I got you. Okay.
Two things that Drake and I pointed out were the noetic soul and the eternal conscious torment. Those were the two things that we were pointing out.
Yeah, and
Obviously,
it's
Quran teaches, God is a physical being.
The Quran uses the word soul, nafs, in the exact same way the Bible used it. It just uses it to refer to the person. It's not this metaphysical abstraction. That's kind of, you correct me if I'm wrong, Drake, but that's how the Bible used the word nefesh. It's like a term for the person.
Their life force. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the life force, the person. Yeah, the Quran uses it in the exact same way.
The thing is that it's conflated with the heart. And obviously, in the Bible, the heart is conflated with the mind, which would conflate the soul and the mind. And the Bible does not conflate the nefesh and the heart with the mind.
There's a verse in the Bible. Let me pull it first. I'll answer the question on resurrection, because I was asked that one. One moment. Where's the verse? It's Surah 75 or 3. Okay. In the name of God, the Almighty. Well, okay.
Wally, when you're finished with this subject, I have a question for you as well.
Certainly. So yeah, it says, does a man think that we will not assemble his bones? Verily, we are able to fashion his fingertips. The truth is, man intends to continue unrestrained. So yeah, basically that's what's be. So how is it going to be carried out? Well, God's going to assemble our bones, and He will fashion our fingertips.
Can you tell me this, Surah, again? I just want to read it.
It's Surah 75, verse 3.
Okay,
and 4. No problem.
Yeah.
Was there
the thing that I pointed out was that the Quran conflates the nafs and the heart, which biblically is conflated with the mind. So that's clearly teaching a noetic soul.
That's a non sequitur.
How is that a non sequitur?
I don't know. Explain to me how that follows God. I mean, like it's in the Bible as well. It uses the same kind of language. Let me pull up the verse. Mark 12:30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is just a colloquial poetic way of saying that you will love God with every part of you. You will love God fully. That's just a way of saying that.
Yeah, I know.
The Bible mentions the heart in that verse.
But the thing is, the Quran conflates the heart and the soul, which obviously means conflating the mind and the soul.
Does Mark 12:30 conflate the mind with the soul? The heart with the soul?
It conflates the mind and the heart.
So you cut out there. Say that one more time.
It conflates the mind and the heart.
Which one? The Mark?
Yeah, it doesn't conflate the mind and the soul.
And
what we're saying is the Quran conflates the mind and the nafs.
Mark 12, it mentions all three of them. It says, with all thy heart and with all thy soul, with all thy mind. So according to Mark, you can love God in your heart and in your soul and in your mind. All three of them.
Conflating, the soul and the mind.
Neither is the Quran for the exact same reason.
I can cite you from the Quran that this faculty is conflated. It's separate. What Mark separates the soul and the mind and whatnot.
We know throughout the Bible as well and the Quran, God talks about the heart. He uses the heart symbolically as a kind of a symbol of people's capacity to receive revelation, to receive, hardening people's hearts, softens people's heart of flesh. We know that God uses this type of language and terminology. To say that because, you may find a verse that says soul and heart in the same verse, that this is instantiating the Greek metaphysics. This is beyond. This is the most laziest scholarship, or at least the noetic soul doctrine, the ghost soul doctrine.
The noetic soul is specifically the idea that you think with your soul and not with your brain.
According to the Quran, a soul is an individual. It's just a person. It's a person. The free will, free agency being. That's it.
So it's free will, okay.
Free agency, free will, because God has given us a choice in our life.
In a parallel sense, those faculties are directly conflated. One verse, and I'll recite it to you right now in Arabic. Surah Al-Qiyamah, ayah 26. كلا إذا بلغت اعترافي. Okay? Translated. But no, beware of the day when the soul reaches the collarbone as it leaves. In context, this is talking about the nafs. Earlier on in the surah,
No,
it is talking about
it's not. It does not say nafs there. It says no, indeed, when it reaches the collarbone. It does not say nafs
yeah,
in that book. That's an insert.
it's talking about nafs.
Say it again.
It's talking about the nafs.
No, it's
Look,
not. It does not say nafs in that verse.
Ayah 2, look at it in context. In Ayah 2, we read, وَلَا أَقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ النَّفْس.
Yeah, it says,
Okay.
and I swear by the self-reproaching soul, i.e., that the self-reproaching person.
This
human
is
being.
referring. The subject is the soul.
No,
This
it's
soul-
talking about many things. It's the subject here. The entire context of this surah is the resurrection. It's not. It says the moon is eclipsed and the sun. It's talking about many things, and it's relaying the gravity and the severity of the day of judgment. That's what it's talking about. That's the context of the verse. It's not. This verse is not a tome on the nature of the soul.
Yeah,
it's not.
it never says it. You're not following what I'm saying. I'm saying.
I don't know what. I don't know how your point
It
follows.
says that the soul reaches the collarbone as it leaves. Do you agree with that?
No, I do not agree with that because it does not say the soul
That's
reaches the
what
collarbone.
it says.
It does not say soul. Find me in where is the verse? Find me in verse 26 where it uses the word nafs. It's not there.
I didn't use the word, but in context, it's referring to it. That's the
This
subject.
is something you're extrapolating. No, indeed, when it reaches the collarbone. This is talking about the last breath of man leaving him, the breath of life. He's going to die.
The breath
it
of
is
life, so it
used-
is talking about the nafs. So
No, it's
the
not.
nafs.
You're inserting that in.
You just said it's the breath of life.
You're pulling something from literally like 20 verses behind, and you're trying to attach it to verse 26.
I'm not pulling it about 20 verses behind. That is how the surah goes. If you look at it in context, that is the subject.
The subject is the resurrection day, and God, when he's talking about the soul, he's talking about the individual himself who will be cursing himself on that day. That is very clearly what it says, and anybody who's watching this debate right now,
So what is balaghat?
go to 75 and see,
So what
is this
balaghat in the
is the primary thing the nature of the soul, or is this talking about the day of resurrection, surah?
Yeah, in general, it's talking about the day of resurrection, but verse 2 is clearly talking about the soul. If it's not the nafs, then what is balaghat from the collarbone? What is balaghat?
Let me pull up the verse again.
What is leaving the collarbone?
The breath,
The breath of
the life of the person.
So
God is
nafs?
using very intimate language here, talking about the life of the person leaving.
So what's the breath of life or the nafs?
We have, and you would not make this mistake with the Bible. I don't make this mistake with the Bible because I'm reasonable with my scholarship. Is it says in what is it, Genesis 35:16 through 19. It uses the exact same kind of wording. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to
We
pass.
agree with that. Not the,
And it
that's not the
came
thing
to
that
pass
makes
as her soul was in departing. Basically, as it uses her soul was departing. Like it uses the word soul in the exact same context. So are you willing to
saying that this,
Genesis
I'm not
35?
saying that this proves, excuse me, I'm not saying that this proves the soul in the Quran. We agree. This is completely biblical. The doctrine of the nafs or the breath of life. We agree on that. But what I'm saying shows the soul is that Surah Al-Ahzab, Ayah 10, does uses heart in a parallel manner to this, which implies the word of soul.
What did you say? Surah Al-Azab?
Ahzab.
Azab, okay. Let me pull it up.
Ahzab. Yeah. I'll recite it right now. الأبصار وبلغت القلوب
33. Let me pull it up.
بلغت القلوب.
In the name of Allah, the Almighty. Okay.
So here it says,
and when they came to you from above you and from beneath you, and when your eyes swerved and your hearts reached your throats, and you thought thoughts about God.
So
So
here it says the hearts go up, throat. It's using it in a parallel manner.
this is talking about the believers when they were in war, and they saw a great multitude, an army. Oh my goodness. Am I still in? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
okay.
can we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
hear
My
you.
phone, okay, my phone
I
locked
know
out.
what the context is. I'm saying it's using the mind and the nefs in a parallel manner. And this
This
is not just referring to the physical heart.
this is referring to the believers, and
Specifically
anybody can.
using
The believers were in a war, and they were faced up against a great multitude of people, and they were afraid, and so their heart reached their throats. Everybody's felt this with their fear. You feel
it's
like your heart
using
kind of jumped into your throat. It's God is talking
it's
about the
using
feeling that
heart
they
in a
felt, like,
noetic sense.
you know what I mean? And thereupon the believers were tested and shaken with severe shaking, and the waverers and those in whose hearts is disease said, God and his messenger promise us only delusion. This is talking about they were in fear in a war. Their heart jumped into their throat. They were afraid of the multitude, the enemy that was in front of them.
No, it uses heart in a noetic
Read two
sense.
verses ahead. Read two verses ahead.
Yeah, I
And let the
know
writers know.
what the context is talking about. But the
And
point is that
it's nothing to do
refer
with a noetic, like, that you think with your soul. A soul is the living person. That's all it is in the Quran.
yeah, in the sense that qulub is used is obviously in a noetic sense. So when it's conflating it's
In verse
conflating the
10,
nafs
in
qalb.
verse 33, in chapter 33, verse 10, qalub is obviously being used in a noetic sense. Explain that to me, because anybody with an unbiased, sensible reading that's not coming in to try to quote unquote prove the Quran wrong, just seeing what does this book have to say, can see clearly it's just the believers. They were afraid and they felt
Well, it
like their heart was in their throat at that moment.
says, billahi, uh, you know what?
Anybody can do that. You know, this is storytelling. Like, this all this is storytelling. It's very clear
How
what the
is it
context is.
storytelling?
If you just
I'm
This
I'm
is
telling you what the
storytelling.
verse
You're trying to
says.
attach this doctrine, this like noetic doctrine, to it, when all it is the believers. They were facing a multitude. They were scared. They felt their heart was jumping in their throat, and they were shaking, and they thought that God and the messenger, or that the messenger was lying. But God eventually delivered them through. He showed his promise to be true.
No. What it says is that تظن بالله ظنونا, which is entertaining conflicting thoughts about Allah. It is talking
Yeah,
about
they
the
thought
mind.
about God.
All right,
They were
all right.
doubtful.
Move on to another subject. This
Okay,
is y'all have I think exhausted that conversation.
Wally, can I
okay,
ask
yeah,
you my question?
certainly.
So earlier you said that you believe that the Quran is a correction of the Old and the New Testament, and I've heard that a lot. But what I always hear, and I guess what I would be curious to see if you could tell me,
Yes.
is how are you able to demonstrate that what we have today as the Old and the New Testament are not the original Old and New Testament?
Well, I would start with, I mean, Drake has done a considerable amount of work showing that, the Greek New Testament we have today. I mean, you believe it was originally in Hebrew, right?
I'm
You you
sorry,
even you've even admitted yourself that the New Testament, it was originally in Hebrew, and that you can't, or with through painstaking scholarship, you believe that you come to the truth regarding this matter and what the scriptures say, but that there has been some screwing with the text, and
Okay.
you've labored on that for years, have you
All right.
not?
so
No, he's talking to me on that point.
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that the New Testament was originally written in Hebrew and Aramaic primarily. There may have been a couple letters written in Greek, but I think, yeah, primarily it was in Hebrew and Aramaic. And I do believe there was definitely some embellishments made by the Catholic monks later on. That's
so
absolutely
do
true.
we
Yeah.
Yeah,
do we have
the fact that Isa, or Jesus, he was a Hebrew man, and that we have all of these books nowadays speaking about him, and they're all in Greek. It is certainly suspicious. It is cause for
okay?
concern.
Let me ask my question again. What is
Okay.
your evidence that the Old and New Testament have been modified so as to be different from what the Old and New Testament are supposed to be?
Well, all we would have today is if this statement is true that the Old and New Testament were modified, all we have today are the modifications. So I can't compare it to some original before
No,
that. But I can
I'm
show,
glad that you said that. I'm glad that you said that.
I can show inconsistencies throughout the Bible which show that it is contradictory, certainly. And
So I can.
Hold on. Let me speak on this for a moment. Bones, this is not something that I have made a specific blog listing the differences, that I think the originals wrote and what were the later embellishments. I haven't done that necessarily, but if you read my books on the Trinity, my Conquering the Verbal Sorcery of Trinitarianism, Why I Left the Christian Church, my 130 Reasons book, I list like a lot of embellishments that the Catholic Church made on the New Testament. They did. There's a lot. There really is.
Have either of you seen the debate between James White and Bart Ehrman?
Yes, I have. I've seen it multiple times.
Okay. Now, in that debate, Ehrman and White agreed that we do, in fact, have many variations of the New Testament in circulation. All kinds of different variations. I think like 100,000 textual variants. But
no, I wouldn't say that many. When it comes to meaningful,
there's some that don't have the story about the adulterous woman.
Yeah,
you've mentioned that before.
Yeah,
Jake.
sure. Yeah, the exact. I mean, this is stuff I studied almost 15 something years ago. I don't have it on the top of my head right now, but I would side with Waleed on this fact that the New Testament has been greatly embellished by the Catholic Church.
Okay.
It has, but hold on. That doesn't mean to say that we can't recover the original, because I have shown in all of my books, I have shown that you can recover very clearly, very easily. Any good scholar can recover the original reading from the exact manuscripts that we have. Okay, so I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not trying to side or give any ammunition to Muslims. I am admitting to the Muslims, yes, the New Testament has been embellished upon. It has. Yeah, that's true.
The extant manuscripts that we have. I am still trying to respond. The extant manuscripts that we have, we know what the variations are. Because we have them.
Yeah.
Okay. None of the variations are in any way significant enough to modify any form of Christian doctrine.
They are.
99.9% of the variations.
The adulterous woman story is an important one.
Yeah, the adulterous woman story is a big one, and the text in Matthew 28 about baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Those are probably the two biggest ones. Yeah. And they're very big.
Yeah, so there are doctrinal implications to these corruptions. There are some severe doctrinal implications.
Maybe on those too, but what I said was that 98% of them plus are meaningless. They're absolutely meaningless, and we're able to determine that the sections that you guys just quoted were not in the original. They're not in the oldest manuscripts. So, since we know what my point is this, and I'll finish this up because there's too many people talking at one time. We know what the original New Testament said, and the Quran doesn't come anywhere close. So how does that work to you, Wally?
Well, we know according to the Quran, the Injil, the scripture, the revelation given unto Jesus, that this was something directly given unto him by the Most High. And what we have today with respect to the Gospels are, at least even if you believe that, which I don't, but for multiple reasons, but so-called eyewitness testimonies of his life. So automatically we know that what we have today is not the original which God says was revealed into Jesus.
That's not true.
And I'm not using this pejoratively, but these are like stories about Jesus' life, varying degrees of contradiction between them.
I just explained to you that we do know what was in the original New Testament because we know what's not supposed to be there. And what I'm telling you is that the Quran does not approach anything even remotely resembling the New Testament that we know is supposed to exist. And what I'm asking you for is some sort of textual or historical evidence that what's in the Quran is closer to what's supposed to be in the New Testament than what we have in the New Testament today? Can you do that?
Well, sure. We can start with the point that there is one God, and that there is none great other than God. This is a very clear doctrine within the Quran, and we have that within the Bible, where we have a fragment of that where Jesus says that there's none great. Let me pull up the verse. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. I'm not great, Jesus. I am not.
John 14:28.
Yeah, John 14:28. This 28. Well, in the Christian worldview, Jesus. You heard me tell you, I'm going away, and I will come back to you. If you love me, you rejoice that I'm for the Father. No, not that one. Not John 8. Not John 14. Jesus, don't.
Well, to that.
You are not answering my question. I'm asking you to show me how the Quran is more similar to some mysterious New Testament that we evidently have no record of than what we have as the New Testament today.
But hold on. John 14:28 clearly says, "I go unto my Father, for my Father is greater than I." That's John 14:28 is the text I was referring to. That's correct.
No, what I was recalling was a text of Mark 10:18 where Jesus says, "And Jesus said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God." Yeah. So there, Jesus is saying he's not good. Well, in the Christian worldview, Jesus has a magnificent state. He's the Son of God. He's great. He's good. This is not, this is like.
I believe Hustle's asking you about the text. Like, Hustle, isn't it what you're saying that
I'm asking you
that the
about
Quran
the text.
does not have the same amount of textual support that the New Testament Gospels have?
I'm asking. Okay. No, it is related to the text. Okay, I'm not asking about what the text says. I'm asking the text that we have today, or the New Testament that we have today, you say is less trustworthy than the Quran if our objective is to figure out what was in the original Injil. Okay? Can you show that historically? Can you show me older manuscripts of the New Testament other than what we already have that would validate the argument that you made?
No, all we have right now are the Greek.
Okay.
Historically, so I cannot. No, I'm starting with the Quran as the foundation of my worldview, and I'm accepting it axiomatically, dogmatically.
Okay, understood.
But
that was what I thought.
Okay, so and I'll give you the reasoning for why. And I've considered Christianity, the biblical worldview, for a long, long time. Karaite Judaism, Messianic Judaism. I've considered all this stuff, and what has led me to believe the Quran and why I can't go down the biblical worldview is mainly the contradictions within the Bible. There are plenty of contradictions all over the Bible, including the New Testament, regarding the life of Jesus, the story of Jesus, what he did, et cetera, how the crucifixion went about. And, Paul is, irreconcilable with the Old Testament. Any plain reading of him, he's certainly the most confusing author within the entire New Testament. And then from there, these confusions.
Like Ebionites. That sounds like Ebionites.
It's total Ebionite
clearly
doctrine.
And these confusions lead me. Okay. The Bible is confusing me. There seems to be a bunch of contradictions.
All right, Wally, send me the list of the contradictions that you think exist between the New Testament and the Old Testament.
I have them all here.
I'd like to address the contradiction because you're saying the Quran teaches resurrection, but the Bible teaches that Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection. But correct me if I'm wrong, the Quran does teach that Christ died on the cross.
No, he did not die on the cross according to the Quran.
So then how is Christ the first fruits of the resurrection in the Quran?
Remember, I don't believe the entire New Testament is correct.
It's not the question he asked you, man. That wasn't the question.
No, Christ is not the first fruits of the resurrection because the Quran doesn't say that. I'm not operating off of the New Testament.
So how did Christ die?
I don't know. God doesn't say that.
Oh,
my understanding. I'm not going to speak of. My understanding of the Quran is that he died of old age.
Old age.
Died in the Quran.
Do you have any record of this?
Let me pull up.
Where's your strictly dogmatic citation on that?
Let me pull up the verse in the Quran that leads me to that. conclusion.
Doesn't the Quran say that Allah put somebody else on the cross and made him look like Jesus?
No,
Well, it's
Hold on.
type of
Let
discussion.
Hans speak on this. Hans, go ahead.
But it doesn't necessarily say he was substituted. That's just one theory.
Yeah, it says they did not kill him, they did not crucify him. It was made to them to appear to be so.
That's all that's regarding that matter.
That sounds very Gnostic. It does.
Yeah, it's just that he was made to appear.
How is that Gnostic?
There's your Platonic influence again.
That was
Exactly what the
literally
Gnostics taught on the
word for
subject.
word what they taught on that. Yeah, word for
Yeah, some
word.
people believe.
Somehow, some way, the people were led to believe that Jesus was crucified and he was not.
Come
God spared him.
on, dude. We have
That's-
four
that's-
narrative accounts of what happened.
And they all
And you were
contradict
arguing
the
that the New
each other.
Testament was inconsistent. They're not
There's four
inconsistent on the
anonymous
death and resurrection of Christ
don't
at
even-
all.
That we have four anonymous gospels that don't even own up to who wrote these gospels. We don't know according to the gospels. That's all you have.
They have their names on them. It was Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. I mean, what?
There's nothing in the gospels that says, this is my gospel, Mark. And even the idea of Mark or Luke or John, etc. And even if you look,
disagree on the death and
I
resurrection of Christ.
rarely get to finish my point before I get cut off.
All right, go ahead, Wally. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, even if you look at the Gospels, they, supposedly they're supposed to be eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, right? That's what Christians say, or that's what biblical believers say.
That's obvious from the narratives. It's obvious.
Okay. When did Jesus start to get followers in his life? Obviously, when he was older, and he started his ministry, right? Well, the Gospels, they record Jesus from when he was a baby and things that went on from when he was a child. He didn't have followers then that could have been eyewitnesses to his life.
In their culture, you had to be over 30 years of age to be considered a teacher.
Right. So Jesus got followers and eyewitnesses to him after he became over 30 years old and he started his ministry. Well, the Gospels record his life before he was 30. From when he was a baby, it has certain things said about him. Well, how could he
wasn't officiating. He wasn't speaking as an authoritative teacher at that time, though. He was just a kid trying to figure things out.
So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they were following Jesus around when he was a baby and recording his life via eyewitness account?
My man, honestly, don't you think that any of these people could have gone to Jesus' mother and said, hey, what was he like when he was a baby?
These are eyewitness accounts of his life when he was a baby. I just want to know, is that your position? Because it mentions things before he was 30 years old about his life, the Gospels.
It's a decent question. I'll look. I have not thought about that question. I'll think about that. I'll write that down to study.
I am not understanding what the significance of that is. I mean, if the
where does the
Yeah, I mean, where does he had parents?
What's the implication of what you're saying?
Well, his parents did not write the Gospels. The Gospels are not according to his parents' worldview. It was through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Well, then you're just challenging the historicity of the document, but we still have 4 different consistent accounts. So that supports the historicity of the document.
They're not consistent. What were Jesus' last words on the cross?
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me?
Did he say that, or did he say it is finished? It depends on what gospel you read. You get a different last word.
Maybe he could have said all those words.
That contradicts. If I were to say, my God, why have you forgotten me? That's me not knowing what's going on. I don't understand, and I'm losing faith in God. But if I say it is finished, it's almost like if it was all planned from the beginning. How is that?
Nowhere does it say he's losing faith in God. He made very clear throughout the Gospels that he knew what he was going to have to do. He said over and over again to his apostles that he was going to fucking die. And they became like blackpilled because of what he was saying. He told them that he was going to die and he was going to ascend again.
My God, why have you forsaken me? That's him being confused, not knowing what he's asking God a question. Why is this going on? Why have you forsaken me? I'm being tortured right now. And then in another gospel, he says, it is finished, as if it was all like planned all along.
It
Like
was.
it doesn't
I
work.
mean,
There's a historical contradiction there.
No, not at all.
It's funny. It's
In every
strange.
account,
Dude,
the disciples
there's
were in hiding after the event because they felt they were going to be persecuted.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
he didn't know the degree to which God would forsake him. He knew he was going to go to die. He knew that. He told his apostles that multiple times, and they freaked out about it. And then later on, when he was on the cross, he didn't know the degree to which his death was going to affect him.
He was aware. Do you believe that Jesus was aware the entire time of the plan that he was going to be crucified for man's sins?
No, I don't. I think he knew he was going to die. There was an ancient tradition among the Jews that the death of the righteous atones for the nation. That was definitely there, but I did.
That implies he would have had knowledge of that. You're just saying he didn't understand what the experience would be like. He had knowledge of the prophecy, but not full knowledge of.
Yeah, I don't agree.
Go ahead.
I think Jesus did know that he was going to be crucified and that he would be crucified to atone for man's sins because
I agree. I agree with that.
But he didn't have the emotional experience until it happened.
That's right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How could one ask why has God forsaken them when they know the plan that they are to die, that they are to be the sacrifice?
Because he's a human being. He had knowledge of the event, but he didn't have the emotional experience.
I mean, it's sort of like,
why did he of the event?
Like, why did he cry when Lazarus died, knowing full well that he had the power to resurrect him? I mean, it's the same type of question, isn't it?
He's not the son of God.
That's exactly correct.
He's not the son. He's a normal human being subject to all the pain and vice that we are.
Correct.
He resurrected a man from the dead. I wouldn't say he's subject to very much.
Say that again?
He resurrected Lazarus. I wouldn't say he's subject to very much.
He did that by the authority of God. I mean, we have prophets all throughout the Old Testament, even the Quran. They're performing all kinds of signs and wonders and miracles. They do it through the authority that God gives them, the strength that God gives them.
Did Jesus do that? Did Jesus resurrect Lazarus with the authority of God?
Yes, he resurrected people from the dead, and he blew into the clay, and it became a bird by the leave of God. Yes, he performed those signs and wonders.
So when I read the story of the resurrection of Lazarus, Jesus isn't asking God to resurrect him. Jesus commands him to come out. That's what it says. It says, Lazarus, come out. Lazarus, come forth.
Right. That's what the New Testament says.
Yeah. So where does he use the authority of God in that command?
Well,
I mean, if I come to you and I say, go get me a beer, I mean, am I talking to you on my authority or on somebody else's authority?
If I were to get you a beer, that is not a miraculous, thing.
We're not talking about miracle. We're talking about authority. We're talking about authority.
That is great and miraculous.
Listen, here it is. I'm going to quote it to you. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Hold on, I got to go further down here.
All right, so I'm quoting Mark chapter 8, verse 29 to 33. And he asked them, and you, who do you say I am? And Kepha, Peter, said to him, you are the Messiah. And he warned them that they should speak no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man has to suffer much and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed. And after 3 days to rise again. And he was speaking about this openly. Openly. Then Peter, taking him aside, began to rebuke him. Yeah.
He knew exactly what was going to happen to him.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense for him to reach the end and say, my God, why have you forsaken me? He knew exactly that he was to suffer tremendously.
Nowhere does it say.
This is like
hold on.
An autist would say. He was having feelings about it, bro. Like, what don't you comprehend about that?
Nowhere does it say in verse 31, and be killed and forsaken of God. He knew the act. He did not know all the conditions and circumstances of the act. He knew he was supposed to die for the sins of the nation. That was the traditional Jewish view. Was that the death of the righteous atones for the nation. That I got that documented all over my 166 Theses book. Rabbis way before Christ were admitting that's the way it always works. That the death of the righteous atones for the nation. But he did not know all the conditions and circumstances of the death. But he knew he was going to die.
All I'm saying, we kind of went down a different rabbit hole. All I was pointing out is that Jesus' last words between the Gospels are different. In Matthew 27:46, it's Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Mark 15:34, it's Father, into thy hand I commend my spirit. And then in Luke, sorry, I'm getting them wrong. But
do they contradict each other or do they differ? They don't contradict each other. It's just different records.
They all can't be his last words.
So let me ask you.
Let me ask you again.
Omission is not the same as contradiction.
Do any of those words contradict each other?
Yeah, I would say so.
He's trying to say because the narrative context is different, it changes the way Christ was thinking about the event, which is storytelling.
Yeah. It paints a different narrative as to what Christ was
No,
going
you
through,
say it paints a different narrative.
We simply disagree on the matter. Why, my God,
I'm not using anything.
My God, why have you forgotten? And it is finished. These are two different states of mind. Definitely.
Wow. What are the different frames of mind here? Say again.
Explain.
Say these Father, my God, why have you forgotten me? And it is finished. These are two different states of mind.
No. They are the same frame of mind, and one is emotionally involved. Like it's a human. They're emotional.
Involved. They're both emotionally involved.
He's a human being.
Implies exhaustion with the event.
Yeah.
So go ahead and explain, Waleed. What's the difference that you're narrating about this story here?
The difference is in John where he says it is finished. This is a different mindset, a different frame of mind. He seems to be perfectly calm and understanding and not okay. He seems to be perfectly aware of everything.
You are reading that into the text.
And this was the fulfillment of everything. It is finished. It is done. Then you have in the other Gospels, my God, why have you forsaken me? As if he doesn't know what the plan was, that he was to suffer greatly for this in this sacrifice. My God, why have you forgotten me? He doesn't know. He was shocked at the amount of suffering he went through, but we're supposed to believe that he knew all along that he was supposed to go through this.
He did.
You're saying it is finished just means that you're saying that when we read it is finished, that this was like relaxed, calm, cool, and collected. That's your narrative that you're adding to that text.
I really just
read what that is.
I really think it's nonsense because that my God, why have you forsaken me? That's taken from I think either Matthew or Mark, but in either case, both Matthew and Mark feature Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he recognizes what he's about to have to go through.
Yeah,
clearly, the statement made later on, "Why have you forsaken me?" is not him saying, "Wow, I can't believe this is happening right now."
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, here's my other question, Wally. You don't
also a quotation from the Old Testament?
Say that again?
Yes,
isn't Christ final? Exactly.
Wally, here's my last question. You don't like the gospel. You don't believe the Gospels because they are different from each other. Why would you then go to the Quran, which is radically different from all four of them in every conceivable way?
I go to the Quran because it very clearly returns us back to that original tradition of worshiping one God.
Which you can't prove.
It's not the original tradition. It's the pre-temple version of the
Worshiping-
tradition that the rabbinics came up with. That's what this
Worshiping-
all about.
Because it follows from
No.
AD
Once the temple was dude, I have a video by Tovia Singer where he admits this, that after the temple was first destroyed, then the rabbinics came up with this new religion that blood sacrifice doesn't matter anymore. It was not the original position. It was the embellished position after the temple was destroyed.
You have got to
Yes.
send that to me.
And
I would love to see that from Tobias
That's
Singer.
what the Jews have in common with the Muslims.
That's exactly
If you-
right.
If you have that ready, can you?
Yeah,
can you
I'll
send that to me?
I'll send it to you forthwith.
That's so interesting. I cannot believe Tobias Singer would actually say that.
He admitted it.
What I was saying is the reason why I believe the Quran and I accept it. Well, firstly, because God guides whom He wills. That's the ultimate reason. And the reasons, however, I can articulate to you is that it brings us back to the worshiping of one God, the uncompromising monotheism, which starts to get lost in the New Testament. That's why.
You know nobody here. You know nobody here rejects the monotheism. We all believe in monotheism.
You believe God has a son. You've
Yeah.
ascribed a partner with God. You made a partner with him.
He's not eternal partner. He's not an eternal
Listen.
partner.
Well,
Listen.
I mean, I'm a Trinitarian, so
Wait, listen.
Look, the Bible clearly teaches
let me just say-
subordinationism. So what?
Wait, let me just say.
Even John Owen admitted there was subordinationism. I got that documented as well.
If God wanted to, why can't He have a son?
Because he has no consort.
Because He has no consort. Well, our concept of the sonship of God does
If
not
God
mean
had a
having.
son, I would be the first to believe. But because he has no consort nor wife, by definition, he can have no son.
Well, the biblical meaning of sonship does not always mean having a wife, and literal sex.
Notice how Wali's position assumes upon the Christian theology, upon the Christian
How so?
notion.
How so?
All the heretics assume first upon the Christian theology.
How so?
You're assuming the word son means what the Christians mean by the word son. That's what you mean. That's what you're doing.
I'm assuming that son means the product of a man and woman meeting each other and the woman bearing a child.
This is all this rabbinic literalism. You know very well. I have presented very clearly the Bible the Bible uses accommodation when there are issues that go beyond human experience, because the Bible's epistemology and metaphysics is very clearly, or ontology, it's very clearly empiricist. So the Bible speaks to human beings in an empirical epistemology. So if some doctrine goes beyond what human beings experience on a regular basis, God will use accommodation.
Okay, so you're basically saying Jesus is not the son of God in the exact same way that,
Of course. Of course.
Okay. Even though it says he's begotten of the Father.
Yeah, but because God wasn't fucking a human woman to produce a son. Obviously there's an accommodation being used there.
Then what is meant by son then?
That he came out of the Father, that he emanated out of him, he came out of his substance. We don't, dude. Again, you're trying to get me to storytell, and I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna storytell. All I know is that the Son came out of the Father at the beginning. That's what the Bible says.
All right. So if I were to accurately understand what you're saying that Jesus is the Son of God in some way, which there's no analogous way in the world to explain that, but it's some accommodation when God says He is His Son.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So, there's no evidence at all that such a son could exist. The only
among human beings, sure, yeah. A human father cannot just come out with a son, but
right.
God
There's
is not a
another
human
category
being.
Then, which Jesus is. There's
Huh?
another category of son which Jesus is, of the Father, which a son which somehow does not involve a consort of any kind. This is a story. This is a story which the Quran
It's
denies.
revelation. It's the record that God has given us. It's what happened. That's what God says happened. What do you want me to do?
I don't want you to do
you
it.
literally what would you want me to
I-
videotape with the moment 6,500 fucking whatever years ago where God like gave birth to Jesus? That's what you want me to do in order for you to be convinced?
No. What I am saying is simply that you have made a partner with God. There is God, and then there is this other being called Jesus, who is his son, who carries some of the substance of the Father. That's a partner and is an associate God. You pray in his name. His name
Yes,
carries holiness and authority and power to you. That this is an associate partner.
at the beginning.
He's not
Yes,
monotheistic.
at the beginning. Yes, not in eternity.
That's not monotheism. There is another separate being.
Now you're storytelling. You're
who
storytelling
carries-
now.
I am not. I'm repeating your doctrine to the best of my understanding of what it is. There's another being called Jesus who is a son of God.
This is
who
literally
carries
the doctrine, the argument Christians give to me on a regular basis. It's exactly the argument they give to me.
And Jesus is not worship.
You're a Christian. Your mind works according to the Christian framework. That's why you make
How
these
so?
arguments.
My
Okay,
mind
okay.
is not working. I'm simply using all.
How is it
can
in
God
any
have a-
way an eternal consort with God when I say that at the
There is
beginning,
no eternal
at the
consort. I don't accept
beginning,
that, obviously.
at the beginning,
I don't believe
6,500
Mary is
years
the mother of
ago,
God or any of
that's
that
when
stuff.
Jesus came forth.
Right, and I am pointing out to you that is a partner you have associated with God.
At the beginning,
You
Can I-
have said there is another name
Can I
aside
go
from the
on
name of
for
the
this?
Most High God. There is this other name which carries holiness and power and authority in your worldview, which you pray
Yes.
in the name of. That is a
again,
partner.
this is another Christian argument
Hey,
that
okay.
only that only God can only glorify Himself. He can never, if He wills, glorify another that He has brought forth. This is a Christian argument. I hear it all the time.
That's not what I said. God can glorify and exalt people, certainly, but nothing in the world carries holiness. Only God carries holiness, and of course His Word as well. That's it.
Okay.
There is none other.
Can I-
That's the Quranic
Citation
worldview.
needed on that.
That's
Great.
the Quranic worldview. I'm merely relaying to you what the Quran says. That God has no partner, and I'm warning you of that.
Yeah,
Because
he
God
has.
does not-
Are you
God
sure?
does not-
Hold on. Are you sure the Quran was not speaking of an eternal context there, an eternal partner?
In what way?
I'm not saying that Jesus or the Son was an eternal partner with God. He was not an eternal partner. There's only one in eternity. That is the
Excuse
Father.
me.
Did they both participate in creating the world?
Both of you.
No. The Father created the heavens and the earth. The Son,
Yeah.
the Son created everything in the heavens and the earth. That's how the New Testament describes it.
That's
Okay.
a partnership with God. Both of them
Yeah,
have worked together in synchronicity.
in time, in the beginning.
synchronicity.
Yeah.
Both of them have worked together in synchronicity to put together what we see and know of as the world.
Not-
the heavens
not-
and the earth and all that is in it.
But not in
Right.
eternity. Hans, go ahead. Go ahead, Hans.
Okay. Because the way that the Quran uses sharika refers to another being worshipped. And in the author of the Quran really thought that having a son meant he was being worshipped alongside God. What I would ask Waleed is simple. If God wanted to, then why can't he have a son?
Because he has no consort. That is what the Quran says. In order for there to be a consort, in order for there to be a son, begotten, this is very literal language. A begotten son, one has to have a consort.
You can't just like in the 6th and 7th century they're just going to pretend like the prophets never existed before them. They're just going to pretend like it never even happened, and Muhammad just came up with his own religion and he's the only prophet. And dude, I've read a good bit of the Quran. I haven't read everything in the Quran.
That is a complete straw man of the Quranic position.
That's what you're doing. You're straw manning the Bible. The writers of the Quran were operating off of what the writers of the Bible said. I've read a good bit of the first part, like at least the first third of the Quran, and they're just operating off the same stories that you find in the Bible that pre-existed the Quran by many centuries. Like,
right. So you're saying that they plagiarized the Bible and perverted it?
Of course, yeah, sure.
No. Well, the Quranic mission, God says that all of these people, Moses, Jesus, Abraham, these were all prophets of God following upon the same tradition. So, of course, naturally, the Quran is going to discuss these people because.
So you can't just reinvent the wheel, bro. You're trying to reinvent the wheel. God can't have a son because the Quran says so. Even though the Bible itself doesn't say that. If God wants to have a son, he can have one if he wants to. What the hell?
Well, then there would need to be a consort in order for it to be any. Anything, if it's not poetic and metaphorical, if it means anything, then he would have to have a consort.
Okay, you're trying.
Is Jesus the physical Son of God, or is he symbolically, poetically the Son of God?
No, he's physically the Son, meaning that he came forth from the Father. But that doesn't mean that he's human, that he has to have a wife to have sex with. No, it doesn't mean that.
Right, and that's a strange and arbitrary story that God.
No, it's a record. No. This is again, and now you're taking on.
I'm getting interrupted.
Now you're taking on the proposopon of an atheist.
I am not an atheist. I believe in God Almighty, and everybody knows that.
The Bible is not a story; it is a record. There's a difference between a story and a record. When we are quoting the Bible, we are quoting a record, not a story. It's not something we're coming up with in our heads. That's completely a straw man argument, and you know it.
There are things within the Bible that definitely are categorized as a story that are accurately categorized as a story. Certainly.
Hold on. No. That is a total misrepresentation, and you know it. I am not coming when I use the word story. I'm talking about things that people imagine in their heads. When I'm reading the Bible, that is a physical object with a history behind it, with millions of people who have testified to it. It is a book made of paper and ink. It is a record. It is not a story that I'm inventing in my head. And will you admit that you deliberately misrepresented my position?
If I misrepresented your position, then it
no. Don't say if. Don't say if. You are to admit you deliberately misrepresented my position.
No, and I will tell you why I did not.
Go ahead.
I'm saying the story. No, the Bible is a physical book. Therefore,
it is a record. A record, not a story. Not a record, not a story.
It is a document from the ancient world, just as, the Epic of Gilgamesh is a document.
You are not addressing what I said. You are not addressing what I said. Again, when I have used the word story, it refers to something just people think up in their head. When I'm talking about a record, it is a physical book with paper and ink, and millions of people have attested to it. Will you admit now that you have misrepresented my position?
Well, you're not letting me explain what I'm saying is the story.
You know exactly. I have explained my position very clearly. I have explained what I'm saying very clearly. Are you going to admit that you misrepresented my position? Yes or no?
You are misunderstanding my position.
You are
So no, I'm not going to admit that.
you are going to acknowledge what I just said. Did you misrepresent what I said? Yes or no?
No, I've told you
Then we're
no
done.
because you're misunderstanding
Then we're
what I'm
done.
saying.
You
So
know
rage
exactly
quit?
what
Are
you
you going to
did.
rage quit?
You know exactly what you did. I'm done. That was disgusting. I'm done. It's been 3 hours plus on this. I'm done. If you cannot distinguish between imaginations that people come up with in their head and a record that has been written down on a piece of paper with ink and paper bound in a book that has been attested by millions of people, then you don't deserve to have a second more of my time. And I'm going to go and enjoy my Sabbath. Everyone enjoy their night.
Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naim, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God, while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this Hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. Their, at the very least, lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my 3 biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short, Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.